1999 The Podcast is a production of the Cage Club Podcast Network. For more podcasts on movies, comics, and all things pop culture, head to cageclub.me. To contact us with questions, comments, or just to say hi, send us an email at 1999@cageclub.me. You can find me on Twitter at probablyrealjb and Joey at Soulpot. And you can follow the show on Twitter at 1999 The Podcast. To support the show, please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. The show is written, produced, and edited by us. Welcome to 1999 The Podcast. I am John Brooks.
And I'm Joey Lewandowski.
Don't you mean Lewandowski?
Yes. Well, so we are recording this amid World Cup fever, and who knows? I was going to be like, this is the time where both England and the US and Poland are all in. But, you know, this episode's going to come out after probably at least one of them loses. So,
yes. But as we're recording right now, both of our ancestral native lands are in the World Cup round of 16.
Yes.
So,
yes, sir.
And one of the most thrilling nail biters of qualification for the round of 16 I have ever seen yesterday.
It was good. I was in a Zoom call. You were giving me play-by-play. Well, not like play-by-play updates because that's not how really soccer works. But you were giving me minute-by-minute updates closer to reality, and I was like, "Ooh, okay." Came down to penalty cards, right? So very exciting.
But yeah, it's been pretty good World Cup so far. Aside from the slavery and human rights abuses and death toll.
Yeah, only like 400 or something people died, right? That seems like an appropriate toll to pay to watch some footy.
But enough about FIFA. Let's talk about Qatar. Two really terrible institutions / global players who deserve
two bad tastes that taste bad together.
Oof, it's real bad. But not much you can do about it for now. Have you watched the FIFA documentary yet, by the way, on Netflix?
No, because I don't think that I want to know the bad things, because like it's a thing that I'm not all the way in on, and if I learn bad things about it, I'm gonna be like, oh, I'm good. But like I'm teetering where like I care when the US plays, I care when my guy scores a goal, and that's it.
Yeah, well, if you're listening and you're playing Argentina, please beat them. That's my request to you.
Easy.
If you happen to be. That happens.
Maybe you've already beaten Argentina by the time you listen to this episode. Maybe this is playing in the locker room as celebration. Yeah. They're like, we love Toy Story 2. We love podcasts about the only podcast that's ever existed about the year 1999 film. We're going to celebrate with this.
Yes. Congratulations on making it to the final, Japan and Ghana. Anyway, that's my prediction for the future. Probably not going to pan out. I want to say thanks to friend of the show and friend of stuff and friend of the network.
But never Bird. Future guest.
Never future guest. You're not coming on the show, Tyler. It's never happening. No, you will at some point. Tyler Birth, who ranked us as his number one podcast.
And you as his number three. Number third.
I don't want to brag. Did you notice what his fourth or fifth top podcast was? I'm wondering if he's trolling with that. I don't think he is, but I thought it was funny.
No, let me take a look. Hold on. Don't tell me. I don't want you to spoil it for me. Oh, yes, the Cowboy Bebop podcast.
I think it's just because he genuinely likes Cowboy Bebop, and that happens to be a coincidence. But the one random anime that I tossed out that people keep telling me to watch, of like 10, that first one that came to mind happens to be the one that he is big fan of a podcast.
Well, it explains why he was so anime, like literally.
Anime.
Did not mean to say that, but it came out perfectly. That's animated on Twitter about it.
He was. I will maybe watch it one day. We'll see. But probably not. Anyway, this is the last movie in our list of 18 defining movies of 1999. There's a lot more to come after this, including some surprises in the next couple weeks. So stay tuned, but we have reached sort of a conclusive point here, and that's kind of exciting. Today, we take a look at our sixth movie from the top 10 highest grossing movies of the year. This one coming in at number 3 highest grossing movie of the year, which is all the more impressive as it was released late in the year on November the 19th. Santana, featuring Rob Thomas's Smooth, continues to inexplicably dominate the American airwaves.
Man, it's a hot one. Was that worth interrupting
like
you for?
7 inches from the noonday sun. While across the pond, my personal savior, Robbie Williams, is number 1 with She's the One, which is Christmas is in the air and toys are on the mind, and Walt Disney Pictures is taking a huge gamble by releasing a then incredibly rare animated sequel into
A
theaters.
Bug's Life 2.
That's the one. Starring Tom Hanks, Tim Allen, Kelsey Grammer, Joan Cusack, Wallace Shawn, Don Rickles, Jim Varney, Annie Potts, Wayne Knight, Laurie Metcalf, Estelle Harris, R. Lee Ermey, Jodie Benson, John Morris as Andy, and Pixar staple John Ratzenberger as Ham, directed by John Lasseter and written by Andrew Stanton, Rita Zhao, Doug Chamberlain, and Chris Webb, from a story by Lasseter, Stanton, Pete Docter, and Ash Brannon. Today's movie is Toy Story 2.
I don't remember, but I almost guarantee you I saw this in theaters. Like when you were like, "What movies did you see?" Like I had to have, right? Because I was 7 when this. No, I wasn't 7. What year did this podcast come
11.
out?
You were 11.
I was 11, as I was for all of these. My sister would have been 4, so I feel
Target
like that's
audience.
kind of peak. Yeah, like there's no way we didn't see this in theaters.
Wow, we found another one. I think, is that 3 now?
Maybe Phantom Menace, probably Phantom Menace, Toy Story 2.
And there was a third one I thought that we discovered that you were like, I might have seen this too. I don't remember.
Maybe it didn't come up yet. I don't think we've done it yet, because none of the movies that we've talked about yet, I don't think they're all like rated R, and I definitely didn't see those in theaters.
Okay, whatever. Anyway, what's Toy Story 2 about?
So right before Andy is about to go to cowboy camp, he accidentally tears Woody the cowboy's arm and has to leave him at home. Wheezy, who needs a new squeak box, gets put outside for a yard sale. In an effort to rescue him, Woody gets captured by Al of Al's Toy Barn, who wants to sell him and a complete set of Woody's Roundup toys to a buyer in Japan. And there is a mission to save Woody from Al, the Chicken Man, before bad things happen and before he gets sent to Japan, separating him from Andy forever.
And there's a second Buzz Lightyear in a subplot, and
there's a whole lot of things that I didn't talk about because I think the thing is that with most, so I think there's 2 kinds of good movies. There's good movies where like one thing happens, and there's good movies where like everything happens. You know what I mean? And like this is one where like you could tell like a million different things about like what actually goes on.
Yeah.
Or you could just say, hey, some things happen, and he gets Woody back in the end, and also new toys.
Yeah, and it's basically an inversion of Toy Story 1, where Woody has to save Buzz in the first one, and Buzz has to save Woody, right? Is that how it works? Wait, is that right? Buzz saves Woody in the second one.
Well, I think the big difference between these two is that Buzz is no longer like a meme. Like Buzz is actually like a person, even though he's not a person, he's a toy. But I still like that the idea. We talked about all these on Hanks for the Memories. If you want to go check me and future guest Mike Manzi talking about all 4 Toy Story films plus short films, the ABC things and stuff like that. Go check out Hanks for the Memories. But in Toy Story, like the big point of Toy Story 1 is that Buzz does not realize he's a toy, and here he's just like, no, I'm a toy, and I'm going to use my brains that I basically developed in the first movie to save my friend.
Yeah, Buzz.
But he's still dumb enough that they still don't know when it's the fake Buzz Lightyear.
Right.
Yes.
He still has that like arrogance about himself that he's that sort of brash nature that they're still like. Anyway, it's a very funny subplot. Anyway, to understand the significance of Toy Story 2, we need to take a little bit of a look at the historical context. So, to start with, the movie debuted 10 years and 2 days exactly after the beginning of the Disney Renaissance that began with the premiere of The Little Mermaid on November 17th, 1989. And fun fact, the star of The Little Mermaid, Ariel herself, Jodie Benson, plays Barbie. It's almost impossible to conceive of this now, but Disney was in real trouble in the 1980s for reasons I won't get into here, but internal strife and creative stagnation led to some extremely lackluster features like 1988's Oliver and Company, and completely bizarre ones like notoriously 1985's The Black Cauldron, which is a banging movie, but about which an entire separate podcast could easily be produced. Much like the Nintendo Entertainment System saved the entire home video game industry 3 years earlier, The Little Mermaid saved Disney, and in particular, Disney's animation department. What followed was an uninterrupted string of animated musical mega hits, including Beauty and the Beast in 1991, the first animated feature nominated for Best Picture, Aladdin in 1992, and The Lion King in 1994. Mostly forgotten and sandwiched in between The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast was 1990's The Rescuers Down Under, a theatrically released direct sequel to 1977's mildly popular The Rescuers. While the two stars of the original, Bob Newhart and Ava Gabor, both reprised their roles and the film was a modest commercial success, it lost money, grossing $28 million on a $30 million budget, as opposed to the original, which made $71 million on a $7.5 million budget. That's a rough disparity. So by the mid-1990s, Disney had learned some important lessons, and sequels would be the domain of home video only, a decision that paid off nicely. In 1994, Disney released a direct sequel to Aladdin called The Return of Jafar, created on a $3.5 million budget, with money saved on a cheaper animation style and replacing Robin Williams as the voice of Genie with, do you know?
No, I'm going to say Billy Crystal.
Dan Castellaneta, then best known as the voice of Homer Simpson. Castellaneta would also...
as the devil from Futurama.
That's... Sure.
Best known as the devil from Futurama.
Yeah, that's the household.
Hey, Futurama's been canceled 2 more times than The Simpsons has been.
That's true. That's very, very true. Castellaneta would go on to reprise the role of Genie in the animated series that also spun off from Aladdin and aired on Saturday mornings.
I have a very quick question for you, and I'm sorry to interrupt you again.
Yeah, no problem.
So do you know, in the cheaper, so there were 2 different types of Toy Story spin-offs. There was the 4 or 5 minute sort of before thing that they would just put before a movie, and then there were the half-hour specials on ABC that was advertised and had a budget and whatever. Yeah. And so for those, Tom Hanks would do the voice of Woody. But for the 3 or 4 minute things, they would have his brother do the voice. Right. And I was wondering, did his brother do the voice? His brother's whose name I don't remember right now, and I should, because I did a whole podcast about Tom Hanks. But did his brother do the voice of Woody in Woody's Roundup to have it a little bit different, or is that also Tom Hanks, or do you not know that?
That's a great question. I think it's Tom Hanks, but I don't know, and I'd be interested to find out. I think it's just Tom Hanks kind of doing an affectation, but maybe. That's interesting.
I don't know, because you could play with that audio in all sorts of ways and whatever. And a lot of the Toy Story movies, each one is basically, to a certain extent, Pixar saying look at this amazing animation thing that we figured. I know it's audio is different than video, but look at this amazing animation thing that we figured out that no one's ever done before, and showing off their creative muscles. So I can see them just playing with the audio, pitching it down, sort of doing the old timey sound effects or whatever. But I was just wondering if his brother was here, because it sounds like Woody, obviously, but it's not exactly like Woody. But who knows?
Right. Interesting. He was not in the credits, so that's all I can tell you.
So probably Tom. Okay.
This was followed by Aladdin and the King of Thieves in 1996, which featured the return of Williams, and in 1998, The Lion King 2: Simba's Pride. All of this is relevant because of the only real major risk Disney took in the 90s when it decided to bankroll a movie called Toy Story, created entirely on computers by a company that had begun in 1979 as a division of Lucasfilm called Pixar. Toy Story wasn't Pixar's first movie exactly. That would be The Rescuers Down Under, which used software developed by Pixar to, for the first time, process and color 2D hand-drawn animation with the assistance of computers. So all those scenes in Aladdin that are CGI combined with 2D hand-drawn animation, right? And then also a lot of the backgrounds are, instead of being hand-colored, they're colored with a computer program. So Pixar developed that software, which is kind of where the Disney animation and Pixar relationship began. So if not for Rescuers Down Under, weirdly plays a pretty big role in this story. This movie that basically nobody remembers. Though I did see it in theaters. I liked The Rescuers when I was little. I haven't seen it since, and it's probably not very good, but who knows. In 1986, Pixar had produced a short animated film called Luxo Jr. about a ball and a lamp to demonstrate the potential of computer animation as a medium. And of course, that is why the ball and lamp of Luxo Jr. are the mascots of Pixar, and why they often appear as Easter eggs in Pixar films. The idea of making a computer-generated film, even computer-generated special effects were nascent at this point, right? This is only 2 years after Jurassic Park, and only 3 years after Terminator 2, or 4 years, I guess, after Terminator 2. So, I mean, you still have this sort of like, yeah, it's a neat little thing that you can do, but building a whole movie on it's probably not good. And when people thought about like a computer-generated movie, they thought Tron, right? And
Yep.
Tron's great, but Tron is obviously like does not evoke any kind of like it's highly stylized, shall we say? Like it doesn't like hold up well necessarily. So that's kind of what people thought, right? They were trying to do here, and it seemed like a giant risk, but Disney believed in Pixar, I think for good reason. And they were impressed enough with Pixar's work and their software that they signed a 3-film partnership that would start with Toy Story in 1995. And Toy Story, which bucked the Disney trend not just in animated aesthetic, but in not being a musical, though it featured an original score and songs by the legendary Randy Newman, including the Oscar-nominated You've Got a Friend in Me, which lost to a song from Disney's other animated hit from that year, Pocahontas, was a mammoth hit. On a $30 million budget, the film grossed $223 million domestically and $394 million worldwide. It was also a massive critical success. It's one of only a few movies to have a 100% Rotten Tomatoes rating and has a bonkers 95 Metacritic score. We've talked about how Metacritic is a much different kind of a scale, much more of a weighted scale. It is almost never that you see a movie above 95 on Metacritic. I don't think I've ever seen a movie that's 100 on Metacritic. I don't think Citizen Kane is 100 on Metacritic. Like,
well, there's the new, as of today, there's the new best film of all time. Let's see what that has on. But that older movies don't really. It's hard to do.
Is it Dumb and Dumber?
Yes, Dumb and Dumber, the greatest film of all time. No, Gene Dealman, 23 Quad de Commerce, like that. Huh? I don't know.
What?
It's a 3.5 hour long movie about a woman who's also she's a mother and a prostitute, and it's just her sort of doing work around her house in real time.
Oh, okay. Sounds like the Shawshank Redemption to me.
But yeah, Sight and Sound does every 10 years. They poll a bunch of critics at the best films of all time, and that today dethroned Vertigo, which had, I guess, a 10-year run after Citizen Kane had like a 50-year run. But yeah, big news in the world today.
Well, you know what other movie has a 100% Rotten Tomatoes rating?
What other movie has a 100% Rotten Tomatoes rating? A lot of them, but which one are you talking about?
Toy Story 2.
Well, okay, that's fair.
Which has a slightly lower, but still pretty incredible 88 Metacritic score. The Pixar magic struck twice in 1998 with the release of A Bug's Life, which was similarly critical and commercially successful and proved Toy Story had not been a fluke. Sorry, that's a Bug's Life joke. Thank you. So while Disney's One Big Gamble paid off enormously and reshaped animated features forever, and Disney would go on to purchase Pixar outright in a few years later, they saw no need in breaking away from what they knew worked. And what they knew worked was releasing sequels to animated films on home video is what worked. Rumors of a sequel to Toy Story began to swirl in 1995, and part of a January 1996 Entertainment Weekly article titled, "Could a Toy Story sequel be released straight to video?" reads, quote, "Disney, meanwhile, refuses to comment on a Toy Story sequel. A lower quality knockoff for video is not an editorial choice I would make," says one Disney executive. "But you can make huge amounts of money by going into sell-through. Videos intended for sale rather than rental, usually big-budget family films, are often priced as low as $12 and can quadruple a film's revenues." The exec's opinion notwithstanding, Disney has aggressively pursued the direct-to-video sequel market. Indeed, Disney started the trend in 1994 with the return of Jafar, even without Robin Williams as the genie. The Aladdin follow-up moved 10 million copies at $22.99 each.
Ooh.
Yeah, making it one of the 15 top-selling videos of all time. Disney says it will release 4 video sequels a year, which it didn't actually do, I don't think, including Aladdin and the King of Thieves and Honey, We Shrunk Ourselves for 1996. But by 1997, after Disney had taken a look at the work in progress and realized what it had, plans had changed. As Ash Brennan, one of the co-writers of Toy Story 2, once explained, quote, "When we started the film in 1996, the thing to do was to make direct-to-video sequel. That's the way Disney did it, and we follow suit. Nobody was making animated theatrical sequels, with rare exceptions, including American Tail 2. So that's what we did, but we knew we had a great story. We worked on the film, keeping the standards of a theatrical film. And to top it off, all of the original cast returned. The entire cast is back, including Tom Hanks and Tim Allen. In addition, we have some great new voices, including Kelsey Grammer, Wayne Knight, and Joan Cusack. We started developing the project in 1996. We went into production around 1997. We soon realized this film was going to be much better than a direct-to-video project. At the beginning of 1998, we announced it would be a theatrical feature.
And America gasped.
America gasped. And now you expect Frozen 2 and Toy Story 4 and so on and so on and so on. Toy Story 2 spent 2 weeks atop the box office, going on to earn $246 million domestically and $487 million worldwide on a definitely not direct-to-video budget of $90 million. It was nominated for a bunch of awards, including the Academy Award for Best Original Song for When She Loved Me, which we already know from last week. It also, along with Blame Canada, lost to Tarzan and Phil Collins. And a Grammy for Best Song Written for a Motion Picture, Television, and Other Visual Media, which it won. As Rotten Tomatoes includes no bad reviews, I'll take the 2 worst reviews on Metacritic, one from TV Guide's Maitland McDonough, whose Metacritic score is 60, and one from the Austin Chronicle, your friends again, Mark Savlov. Do you know him?
No.
Okay.
Still no.
Okay. Whose Metacritic score is 50, who both only complain that it apparently lacks much in the way of surprises and is too geared to kids, with Savlov concluding, quote, "If you or your kids loved Toy Story, you'll like Toy Story 2 as well."
Too geared to kids. There's a dick joke at the end.
That's true, there is. But kind of blink and you miss it, maybe. I don't know.
Even though it comes back in the blooper. It does come back in the blooper.
Yeah.
Out of context, but still.
Yeah. Toy Story 2 is an astounding 14 Metacritic reviews with a score of 100, starting with TNT Rough Cut.
Rough Cut. One of these times I will. No, I'm more likely to remember the name of the podcast than the name of this outlet.
TNT Rough Cut. And Christopher Brandon, who was our guy from last week. I remember this. Same guy.
Well, I do remember that name. I could not tell you the name without hearing it, but I do remember that name.
He correctly says, quote, "One of those rare sequels that's even better than the original." Other 100s come from the Los Angeles Times' Kenneth Turin, Entertainment Weekly's Lisa Schwartzbaum, Philadelphia Inquirer's Stephen Ray, Newsweek's David Anson, and the Baltimore Sun's Ann Hornaday. Finally, Variety's Todd McCarthy sums it all up by saying, quote, "In the realm of sequels, Toy Story 2 is to Toy Story what The Empire Strikes Back was to its predecessor, a richer, more satisfying film in every respect. The comparison between these two franchises will be pursued no further, given their utter dissimilarity. But John Lasseter and his team, their confidence clearly bolstered by the massive success of their 1995 blockbuster, have conspired to vigorously push the new entry further with fresh characters, broadened scope, boisterous humor, and most of all, a gratifying emotional and thematic depth. Disney and Pixar have an end-of-millennium behemoth here, one that, given its far greater appeal to girls by virtue of its female co-lead, could easily surpass the $362 million grossed by Toy Story worldwide, and as we already know, it did. This is the first sequel and the last film to make our 2 rounds of the essential films of 1999, and because it's a sequel, the debate will always rage as to how it stands alone against the original Toy Story. So to talk about that and a whole lot more, Joey, who is our guest today?
Our guest today is my friend, past guest of Too Fast, Too Forever, and the host, or one of the hosts, of Out Now with Aaron and Abe. It is Aaron Neuwirth.
We'll be right back with Aaron Neuwirth. Welcome to the podcast. It's nice to have you.
Yeah, happy to be. I mean, random invite to Toy Story 2 trap, and I'm like, yes, why would I say no to talking Toy Story 2?
John was like, why Aaron? And I was like, well, number one, he has a podcast. He's fun to talk to. He has good audio. He's probably available. No offense to you, but just like you like to be on podcasts just like I do. And then number two, I looked on Letterboxd and you have a really high rating for Toy Story 2. I'm just like, and who, if you like these movies, who doesn't want to talk about any of the Toy Story movies at any point? You know what I mean? So yeah, I think it's a nice fit.
For sure.
Agreed. Yeah. Aaron, you want to tell people about your podcast or your film criticism or whatever else you do?
Is this it? We're doing it right now? We're on?
Yeah, go for it.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Let's introduce you.
Very casual.
I enjoy good casual. My name is Aaron Neuwirth. I am the writer and editor for We Live Entertainment. I write movie reviews over there. I also write for Why So Blue, for Blu-ray and Criterion related reviews. But I host a podcast called Out Now with Aaron and Abe. My friend Abe and I to talk about the weekly movie releases on a weekly basis. We have a lot of bonus episodes as well. Once a month we do a commentary track, and then whenever there's just other random stuff we like to talk about, we try to get as much fun talking tos out there as we can, whether it's smaller reviews for films that just don't get that we want to give some attention to that might not get it otherwise, or if it's random news topics that we wanted to bring up, or awards things. We just had October, where we yearly do a round of horror themed bonus episodes where there are just various aspects of the horror genre we explore. We've been doing that for Jesus, nearly a decade now. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. Talk about movies.
And I also think that Aaron introduced us through his show, I think, or maybe it was the other way around. I don't know. He's intertwined in my brain with Mark Hoffmeyer, a future guest. And if people follow us on Twitter, I retweet him a lot because he talks about Deep Blue Sea a lot, obviously. And so that's, on brand for us. So, I don't know.
It was the other way around for sure, because Mark tweeted about talking either Tokyo Drift or something Fast and Furious related, and I was like, "What? There's a whole podcast devoted to just Fast and Furious? Okay. I need to go to there."
I wonder how we found. We found Mark because of his Reddit stuff, because he did a crazy thing about Fast and Furious on there. Yes,
that definitely sounds right.
Sure. Yes.
The number of miles driven in the whole series, or like what was it? Something like that.
He has a number of things. He has one that's like how much sweat The Rock has.
I think that's
how much perspiration The Rock has perspired over the course of the Fast and Furious movies. He probably did the data for like the runway chase, and
he also figured out which was the most fast and the most furious. He did that kind of ranking too.
Ooh, okay. Yeah. All right. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Joey, if we did a commentary track, would it be like the worst thing or the best thing ever? I can't decide if we'd be terrible at that or awesome at it.
I don't know. I did 3 with Joe because when I was going to Spain this summer, I was like, we have time to fill and I don't want to record real episodes in advance. So we did commentaries for the first 3 Fast and Furious. It was good. Like, especially considering I didn't know what we were going to talk about because we talked about those movies for 11 or 12 times already.
That would make it challenging, but you have it on screen in front of you. You can certainly, get some mileage out of that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know that it's great. I know that Mike and I did a bunch for Cage Club, and they started good, and by the end, because we did like 50 of them, by the end we're just like, so let's talk about Marvel, because it's just like, you don't even talk about the Nicolas Cage movie in front of you. So I think if we did a few, I think we did them sporadically, it could be good.
Yeah.
Especially about movies that we both love or both hate. Average okay movies are tough.
You think about it like Blair Witch, just like, oh, they're in the woods. Oh, they're still in the woods.
It's surprising how much you can get out of certain movies. Like the people I generally have on for our commentary tracks, we certainly balance a level of humor, obviously, but we balance it with what we like to consider, film history to some degree. And recently, actually, it's been neat because we've been going weirdly back in time, where we did one for the film noir Kiss Me Deadly. We talked about Nosferatu in October. We did Jesus, I just lost it. We had another one, but we were steadily going back in time, and it's like we generally, we settle a lot on 90s movies just because we're 90s kids, and so it kind of, that's a sweet spot for us. But like even going further back, just because of the amount of knowledge we've amassed over the years, it's like this is just interesting to get into as far as like working out ways to have a conversation focused on an era that we were not alive during, but can certainly find ways to explore, where these actors were, who this director is, what have you, what the film industry was like in that day, what separates things like this from things like Pinocchio is the other one. I was thinking that's the other one. I was thinking, because we talked about Robert Zemeckis' Pinocchio, then we talked about the original Disney animated movie. So yeah,
and then the Guillermo del Toro one, which is very different.
It is, and I really like it, and we'll certainly talk about it on the podcast for a regular episode at some point. But the point is, commentaries can be very fun as far as you can either explore tangents or you can, just dig into the weeds on what movies were like at this time. And I mean, you could, you have 3 Fast and Furious movies. There's a lot to dig into as far as the 2000 cinema and what's going on at that time, the rise of new metal and what have you.
So let's get into Toy Story 2.
There's no better segue from new metal to Toy Story 2.
No. We normally start by asking our guest their sort of first experience with the movie in question. I think in this case, I'm going to make it a little bit broader in case it makes more sense.
Sure.
Because of course there's a Toy Story 1, and that factors into Toy Story 2 and
What?
how you saw it and why. And then there's also just Pixar. Yeah, no, there's a prequel.
There's one just called Toy Story.
Toy Story: The Phantom Menace. And then there's like Pixar in general has its own sort of like fandom and vibe. So like, what's your background, your feelings about Pixar, the Toy Story movies, the first time you saw Toy Story 1 and or 2? Go ahead and talk about any of those things.
Oh man, this is a loaded question.
Feel compelled.
Wait, Aaron, I know I'm also not
Yeah.
supposed to ask a lady her age, but I don't know if I'm also not supposed to ask you your age. But how
fine.
old were you in 1999?
99 was when I became a man, of course, and I had my bar mitzvah. So I was 13 in May.
Okay.
Okay, so you're in between us.
Closer to me, but yes, in between. Okay, good. Okay,
Mhm.
that's good context. Okay.
Yeah. Let's see. As far as Pixar goes, outside of Monsters Inc., for whatever reason, I've seen every Pixar film that was possible to see in a theater.
Huh.
I don't know why it's Monsters Inc. That's just a random outlier. I had no reason to not see it, but it just didn't happen for some reason. but I've certainly been a fan of Pixar. It would be easy for me to say, especially those first few, but it's like in the past few years, I have Soul and I have like Coco, which I absolutely adore as films. So it's like
Yeah.
you know, people can talk about the sequels to some of these films or some stuff that just seems lesser than. It's like, well, it's a studio, it can't just knock out A+ every single time. What I like is that it's a studio that does feel like just creation and imagination coming to life pretty much every single time, regardless of how successful. As far as Toy Story goes, saw that of course in theaters when it came out. Was that November 95?
Yep.
As a 95 as a child, much like the world loved it. It's Toy Story. Like it's a brilliant film. Um, I had the VHS. I think I still have it somewhere, and it's big bulky Disney Snapcase thing somewhere.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful film I've watched many times. I think it's still in my top 10 in my ranking of Pixar. I don't have it in my top 5. I know that, but I do have Toy
This
Story.
is Toy Story 1?
Toy Story 1. I do have Toy Story 2
Okay.
in my top 5. It's my favorite of the Toy Story quadrilogy. But, I saw this in theaters as well. I don't know what my expectation was back in the day beyond, well, there's another Toy Story film. That's cool.
Mhm.
Saw it in theaters and I felt blown away. Like I really like Toy Story, but Toy Story 2 just felt like a film that was like faster, funnier. Like it did the typical like sequel thing of like doing not necessarily more of the same, but like doing the thing you like, but bigger and like bigger, just like exponentially increase it in some ways. Except with
Mhm.
Pixar, they know how to do that well for
Mhm.
in many cases, especially with these Toy Story movies. And yeah, I was even as a person that's not as refined in film as I am now, so I was just like, I can't believe how much I like this movie compared to the first movie. It could have easily been just like a lesser thing or like, hey, more of that, but it was just like, this is just a substantial increase as far as
Yeah.
what I could tell in like the writing and the jokes and the we'll talk about the animation, but the animation even got an obvious increase in what it's doing. I mean, there's just so much here that I absolutely adored about this sequel, and learning about like its process, which I know we'll also talk about. Like it's wild that this is almost like a miracle of a movie that happened to begin with. So, from there with Pixar, I've been on board. I mentioned Toy Story 2 is in my top 5. My favorites, it's generally a tie for first between Finding Nemo, Incredibles, and Wall-E. Then
Interesting. Okay.
Coco's just sneaking around in number 4 for me. I really like Coco.
Okay.
And it's
I
not,
think Wall-E is my number 1. I think I like Wall-E the best.
That's
on a
interesting.
given day, Wally's, one of my number 1. On a given day, Incredibles is my number 1.
Isn't
It's-
like it feels like The Incredibles is the one that people like after the fact was just like, this is the best one. I'm like, I like it a lot, but there's something about Wall-E that I'm just like, this is
interesting.
that good
Like,
stuff.
I think to me, Finding Nemo is the one that is like the perfect example of what Pixar can do.
Agreed.
That doesn't necessarily make it
Agreed.
like the best, even though I do have it tied for number 1. But like as far as what they're capable of accomplishing as far as animation, storytelling, emotion, I think all the key ingredients, if you were to describe a Pixar movie, Finding Nemo is the perfect example for that. there's so many of these at this point. It's like, well, I mean, the Toy Stories can do that to some degree as well, but like that, the Finding Nemo, that one sticks out in that manner. Incredibles and WALL-E just have like, they have directors just like, it feels like they're experimenting more with a lot of ideas.
Yeah.
As far as what it's going for. And here's, and I'll wrap this up with a controversial take. I don't hate Cars 2. Abe and I on the podcast, we famously find it fine. I went from Cars 1, where I'm like, how does this world work, to Cars 2 being like, how does this world work, in a more exciting way. It's not where I'm like, I need to watch this all the time to understand it. I'm not doing my 17 laps around Cars 2, but I do like to stick up for it, as far as like, yeah, it's fine. I know what the worst Pixar movie is, and it's not Cars 2.
Well, Cars 1 is pretty high up on my Pixar list, but
good to know.
That's a separate thing.
Cars 3 is good too.
Cars 3 is
Cristela as Cruz is good. Yeah.
Okay, all right. We can have a Cars Smackdown at some point.
It has everybody's favorite actors: Owen Wilson, Cristela, Armie Hammer. Oh wait, sorry,
Larry the Cable Guy. All of them non-problematic.
There's notably less of him in Cars 3.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Notably and blessedly less of him.
Thank the heavens. So, Joey, I'm gonna pass it on to you. You mentioned in the intro that you may well have actually seen this in a theater, which is very exciting. But yeah, same broad question: your Toy Story relationship, your Pixar relationship, your favorite Pixars, etc.
I've seen every Pixar movie except for the first one and the most recent one. I've not seen A Bug's Life for some reason. I will maybe watch it next year. And I have not seen Turning Red yet, but I will this month, because I'm doing my year-end movie catch-up. I feel like something that's like, things go to Disney Plus, I'm just like, I can get to it whenever. Like, there's not an urgency. Like, if that was in theaters, I would have seen it for whatever reason. But on Disney Plus, I'm just like, I can get to it. I feel like, given the ages of me and my sister, we probably saw the first 2 of these in theaters. I know we saw the third one as a family, even though that came out when I was in college. I remember like June or whatever. So I was home from school and we went to see it. And I saw 4 in theaters by myself. I love all 4 of them. I think they're all great in their different ways. I have all 4 of them in my like top 10 Tom Hanks movies. Like, I love all 4 of them more than most things that he's done. And I love most Pixar movies. I am not a huge fan of Cars 2, as Aaron said. It's fine. But, even like I feel like the knock against bad, quote unquote, bad Pixar movies is that like they're not as good as other Pixar movies. And that's a very high bar to reach.
Yeah.
And when something like Coco comes out, you're like, holy shit, like, where'd this come from? Right? Like, that's amazing. And then there's one that's just like, oh yeah, it's pretty good. Like, I liked Luca, but like Luca's like, yeah, it's pretty good. But it's not Coco. It's not Toy Story. It's not WALL-E. It's not whatever, right? But yeah, I love almost all of them. I love all 4 of the Toy Story movies. This and 3 are probably my favorites of the 4 in one order or the other. But yeah, I love all 4 of them. Now, have your 3 daughters, you said on the last episode, I think, that you've shown all of them recently, all these movies, right?
Yeah.
And do they love them all? Do they have a favorite?
I don't think they have a favorite. They do love them all. They love the whole just the whole world.
Do they have a favorite character?
No, I don't. Not really. They sort of gravitate towards Buzz and Woody and Jessie, I think, because they have Buzz and Woody toys and that sort of thing. I took my twins to see Toy Story 4 when they were like 2, and they sat on my lap the entire time and like didn't understand why I was like weeping at the end of the fun toy movie. So that was a fun experience. We had to kind of slowly watch Toy Story movies, because after like Toy Story 2 and then Toy Story 3, like Teddy went through a real kind of existential crisis. And
oh, you mean like the end of the movie where like they all almost die?
Yeah. And then she would like get her toys, especially after 2. She would like get all of her toys and like put them all together under a blanket and make sure they were all like happy and safe in her room and that sort of thing. And I was like, all right, we gotta slow down on these movies.
Can we talk about? I know this is a Toy Story 2 episode, but can we talk about that moment in Toy Story 3 for 1 second? Because I in the theater watching Toy Story 3, a movie that I absolutely adore as well, and I also really like 4. When they're in the fucking trash or incinerator, and you have like everybody like is looking at this, the music's intense, and they all start looking at each other, and like even Buzz the paragon of optimism is like, we're all gonna die right now, guys. I'm sitting there in the theater being like, I couldn't believe like how emotionally invested I was in the idea of, is Mr. Potato Head gonna be okay?
And
Like,
the
I
crazy
couldn't,
thing, the crazy thing is that movie sets it up. You're like, they might actually die. Like, I don't think they can because it's a kids movie, but it's just like logically, narratively,
I don't see how they're not going
it makes sense for them to die here. They have completed their journey. And it's like, what kind of left turn is Pixar pulling that they're going to kill not only the characters, but the franchise? Like, just wild. And then they don't, obviously. But like,
then they have Alien S Machina come after them, and it's fine.
I was just
But
like,
it's
man.
like, but just for that, that brief period for when you see it for the first time, even now when I watch it, I still kind of get wrapped up on the idea that this is not going well. This is going to be terrible. Damn that.
I contended then and contend now that Toy Story 3 is a horror movie, and like no one's going to talk me off of that ledge. I'm sorry, but
it's a horror movie, and it's in a Schindler's Toy Box for a while there as well. When they're like in the prison camp.
Yes. And Toy Story 4 is like a Milos Forman movie. It's like
That's a really good call. That's actually very funny. I can totally see this.
I was 16 when the first Toy Story came out, and thought it genuinely was one of the best movies I'd ever seen. I still kind of think that, but I think Toy Story 2 is better. So I guess that means I think Toy Story 2 is the best movie I've ever seen, or one of them.
I mean,
it's almost
it's like watching like Star Wars and seeing Empire. It's like, well, Star Wars is one of the best movies they've ever made. Also, Empire's better than it. Like, it's like,
right. But I think Toy Story 1 is better than the original Star Wars. I'll even say that. Just like on the merits as a movie, beginning to end, I just think it's a almost perfect movie. But it's interesting because I think, again, I come across this with people all the time. A lot of I know you guys are really into WALL-E and all that stuff, and I completely understand why. I'm not like, shitting on your call at all. But for me, the Pixar that I love is like that first string of movies from Toy Story, Bugs Life, Toy Story 2, Monsters Inc., Finding Nemo, even the first Cars. When it was under the direction of John Lasseter, we'll talk about him a little bit later on, I think, because I don't think we can sort of avoid that discussion. But yeah, it almost became kind of like a joke, because for a while I would just say that Toy Story 2 was the best Pixar movie, and like it was almost like a thing I just sort of resigned myself to. I'm not really sure if I believed it, but having rewatched it a couple times in the last couple of years, like I still think it is. And I think all of the Toy Story movies are brilliant, but something about Toy Story 2 is just so, everything about it works and everything about it is perfect, and it has everything that Pixar does really well. I mean, kind of what you were saying about Finding Nemo, I totally get what you're saying with that, and I kind of agree with you, but I also think Toy Story 2 fits into that category of like, this is just everything that Pixar does best. Done incredibly well. I would say that, like, on my list of the top tier, so I think when you get to something like WALL-E,
have you seen them all? Or I'm assuming you've seen them all.
I think I've seen them all. Yeah, I might have missed, like, I don't know if I've seen Brave all the way. I don't know. There's a couple maybe here and there that I haven't seen all the way through. But I'm pretty sure I've seen them all.
I call it a Mom Bear Italiano. Hey, Mom Bear Italiano. That's the Italian version of Brave that I watch.
Sure. So to me, like, I get why WALL-E is brilliant, but there's something like there's the WALL-E like camp of Pixar movies, and there's the like Monsters Inc. Bugs Life camp of Pixar movies.
Is it like cynical versus like not, or what?
WALL-E is
it's not about it's not cynical. I don't think any Pixar is cynical. It's the high concept, right?
Okay.
Versus not. And I respect the high concept all the time, but it never really, there's something about the purity and simplicity of like, for me, one of the recent Pixar movies that I loved the most, and I thought Soul was brilliant. I think it's a great movie, but I liked Luca more.
It was my co-host Abe's favorite movie of that year on the podcast.
Well, there you go.
Soul or Luca?
Good for you, Abe.
Luca.
Okay.
Luca to me kind of returns to what I love about Pixar's sort of aesthetic. And I think Turning Red as well. I love Turning Red a lot. I think that's a really fantastic movie too.
Luca feels like the closest they've gotten to making a Miyazaki movie. That's what I like about Luca.
Yeah, kind of. Sort of like blended with Toy Story and Monsters Inc.
Sure,
Like,
it certainly has
sort of
the
like
Pixar ingredients in there, but as far as like the stakes themselves, as far as like it's just some kids hanging out and there's some monsters, maybe, like, it's like it's very unassuming in that manner, and it was a shame that it went to Disney Plus, because it's like, this is a perfect like summer hangout theater kind of movie to watch, and they're like, let's shift it off to the streaming service, and it's like,
yeah. And as you said, I think, Aaron, earlier, that there's some B pluses in there, right? There's some, like, you got your like the Good Dinosaur and your Cars 2, right? That's
I like the Good Dinosaur because there's a drug sequence, which I'm like, why is this in a kids movie? Like, I don't love that movie, but I love that that's in
it
a
is
movie like
wild. That scene is wild. Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
I know there's some lower Pixar movies, I don't dislike them, but B plus is still being generous to some of these, but it's fine.
Fair enough. I mean, yeah. I mean, but nothing below like a B minus. Let's say that. I don't.
No, there's too much effort. Like the Good Dinosaur,
right.
I think, is not great, but I mean, the photorealism matched with this concept that I really liked, that just didn't pan out the way I would have hoped, it's still impressive to look at.
No, I agree. I think that's a fair assessment. But yeah, this for me is I can go back and watch this one over and over and over again, and it sounds like we all think of it pretty highly on our list, our short list of Pixar. Now, are we all in agreement? I think, Aaron, you said it's your favorite Toy Story. It's my favorite Toy Story. I think, Joey, you said it's kind of tied with
top
3.
It's 2 and 3 are my favorites.
So let's talk about like why thematically and what it does better or different from Toy Story that you guys think gives it an edge over the first one and also over the other sequels.
Well, I will say, because I've been talking about this for as long as we've been talking about Toy Story 2, like teasing it in previous episodes, it's the name of the URL of the room that we're recording. But I think that what Jesse's song does, When Somebody Loved Me, like it does an entire movie's worth of exposition in like 2.5 minutes. And it's like people who lose their shit, like just break down and sob at the first 10 minutes of Up. Like this does that in 2.5 minutes. And like, it's so well done and just so sweet and heartbreaking and just like real. And like, I love the Jesse character. I like Joan Cusack in the role. I think this song and the sequence is just like, it's unbelievably good. It's like a microcosm of what makes these movies special. And like that song, I think, even though like it's not necessarily the most fun or whatever, is one of, if not my favorite.
It's not fun.
It's not fun, but it's one of my favorite, if not my favorite Toy Story moment, because like, it's just so good. It's just so good. And I just, can't help but love it.
And you could not have struck while the Sarah McLachlan iron was any hotter than at that moment. This was like Adia being played on the radio every 5 fucking seconds. Aaron, what about you?
I've tried to like pinpoint the reason as to why this one like succeeds the first one so easily to me, and I think it comes down to a few reasons. One, and this might be controversial, I like the music better in this movie, including the songs. I don't dislike the songs in Toy Story, but there's something about the Newman songs that I know, like the joke is that he just sings about like stuff that's in front of him, this kind of like, like kind of tone and everything. And it's, but like, he is a brilliant, he's a brilliant musician. That said, it just feels like so like telling me what I'm supposed to feel in the moment kind of music to me, where it just kind of throws me off when I like think about Toy Story and like why it doesn't like sit kind of higher for me. This one, I think the music is not it's not like guiding me in such a direct way. It's just more of it fits for what I'm watching. And yes, you can narrow it down also to the he wrote the music and everything, so to the Sarah McLachlan song, which is a brilliant like short story within the story. And the other like main thing is, I think Toy Story 2 is just, it's doing all of the stuff I like in one again and adding on top of it without feeling overstuffed. Like it's adding more characters, more like set pieces, more places to go. Yet I don't feel like I'm overwhelmed with more of these things. They just feel like amazing additions. Jesse is an amazing addition. The Prospector is a fun addition. Estelle Harris as Mrs. Potato Head is a great addition. Wayne Knight is a great like they all just feel like the perfect ads that do not distract from like whatever story needs to be told. They just add in the best of ways, and it's just frankly funnier. It's just, I mean, I just laugh. I think if I had to weigh the amount of laughter I'm getting out of this movie versus the second movie, or the first movie, it's just a funnier movie.
Well, I think like it's the same thing like with all good sequels. Like, you know, the characters, you know, the world, you know, the story.
Mm-hmm.
Like both the writers and the actors and the audience is like more comfortable with them, and so like they can get a little bit weirder and sillier and just funnier, but still like with the Pixar charm. Like, I think it makes sense for like a good franchise with like good people behind the screen or whatever to do it right. And I think it makes all sense. Like when you do something when a sequel is good, there's nothing better.
Yeah. And it's, you know, when I look at it, there's a lot of like splitting hairs between all four of these movies. Like there's things I can point to in each one of the Toy Stories that I think is the best thing about a Toy Story. Like I think 4 might have my favorite, funniest sequence in it involving Key and Peele's characters. Like, but I mean, like I don't think there's any, all of them, I don't think I've laughed harder at anything in any of the Toy Story movies compared to that sequence in 4. So it's like, you know, they all have their own, you know, it's not a giant gulf of quality that goes between these movies, but I certainly I still look at 2 and think this is the one that like sits at the top of Toy Story Mountain.
I think weirdly, because Toy Story is a 4-part series, or ended up being a 4-part series, it sort of inadvertently also is a really good indicator of what Pixar does so well as a collective, right? We're talking about like Stanton and Doctor and Lasseter and Bird and the rest of them. Is that you get a sense between the Toy Story movies of like the stuff that you missed in between. You get a sense of the world that these characters exist in, and that like you didn't see all the years between Toy Story 1 and 2 and 2 and 3, but like you get what happened without really having to be told very much. Which is a pretty like that's good writing, and it's good sort of world building and good animation, right? And the other thing to me that Toy Story kind of by virtue of its premise sort of reinforces about what's so great about Pixar is I can't remember who said it to me first, but someone pointed out that like there's so much soul behind these characters' eyes, and like that's a really hard thing to do, period, but especially in animation. And even especially when you're dealing with like fundamentally inanimate objects, right? Who are like not ever supposed to really be real, but like they're kind of real. So they're not human. They're not sort of anthropomorphic, right? They're anthropomorphized, I suppose. But you whatever it is that they do, there's this like sense that within the CGI creation, there is this like really, really authentic soul. And I don't know how the fuck they do that, but like they managed to do that for all of their movies, including like WALL-E, where you have this like little junk droid who, you know, has this incredible.
Hey, you watch your tone.
Yeah. Well, whatever he is. Within this thing, and yeah, I don't know. This movie to me, again, is the one where like all of that's firing on all cylinders, where, you know, the adventure is just big enough to not be overwhelming, and the danger is just big enough to not be like soul crushing like it is in 3 and 4, and yeah, just sort of gets it all done. And I cry a lot at the Sarah McLachlan part every time, so fuck that scene.
But in a good way. In a good way.
Can we talk about some of the actors?
Yeah.
You know, we have our stars, and that's what I want to get to. We have plenty of others that we can get to as well. But like,
you want to talk about how weird Tim Allen is and how conflicted I am about him? We can have that conversation.
I mean, I'll put it this way with Tim Allen. He hasn't done anything to hurt me. He hasn't done anything. He's all he said is words.
Personally, yeah.
All he said is, I mean, there are people that have taken their words and gone much further. And Tim Allen is just Tim Allen is merely a comedian with an opinion. You know, whether you agree with him or not, he hasn't done anything to hurt me.
Yeah, I mean, a bit of a right-wing troll on Twitter sometimes, but like fairly harmless.
He's still he's a comedian that makes jokes. Like that's what it comes down to. Do I agree with all of them? No, not really. But I mean, he is what he is, and you know what? He entertains me in these movies, and he entertains me as a Santa Claus. So
I was not locked up with him in prison for drug charges, and he didn't turn on me, so we're good.
It's just not the kind of thing I put energy into. It's like, it's like, what am I going to get out of it? Like, exactly. I'd rather just enjoy him for the, hours of entertainment he has. He's legitimately provided me. But outside of this, and I do think he's, good in these Toy Story movies. He does what there is a reason he was cast in the first one, and there's a reason they didn't just ditch him in the other Toy Story movies, because he's legit great as Buzz Lightyear.
Yes.
But as far as Tom Hanks goes, I mean, Joe, you just mentioned that he's like the 4 Toy Story movies are all in your your top 10 Tom Hanks films. Is that correct?
No, yes, they're all. I think they all. I'll double check that, but I think that they're like. I have a very not complicated history, but like a lot of Tom Hanks things. I'm just like, yeah, it's good. I get it. You're a great actor. Like, what are you doing? All right, here we go. I have officially, as of the end of Hanks for the Memories, Toy Story 2 at number 3, Toy Story 3 at number 4, Toy Story 4 at number 7, and the original at number 9.
Well, the point of me bringing that up is it's there for good reason, because regardless of just being his voice and not being like him in person, he's legit great as Woody. Like it is a very great well acted performance. Like he absolutely knows how to own this role and fill it with a lot of emotion and pathos. And he walks the line of being unlikable at times. Like it is a complex performance that I think deserves so much praise. And the fact that he's done it, multiple times, it's a credit to how good he is that he finds like little nuances to bring to each version of the Woody character. People talk about how 3 was like the end of a trilogy and why would they make a 4? Well, it's like, well, I mean, one thing, why do you want less of this? Like, I mean, I don't understand that logic. Like, what's the harm here? But the other thing is, I like that they're finishing Woody's story in the 4th movie. Like that, it really makes something out of that for me. As far as we saw. I don't know why everyone seems to like acts like Andy was like this amazing character. He's just like a cipher. But it's like, we saw him go to good. He's gone. Okay, what's happening with these actual characters that we've grown up with?
I feel like we know more about Sid from the first movie than we do about Andy.
We very much do, and that's by design. Andy's supposed to be all of us. It's he's supposed to be all of us. Yep. But it's like the idea that you get caught up on this this avatar that doesn't exist. Basically, it's like I like seeing Woody and what his growth is. But yes, in Toy Story 2. It is, you had like you mentioned, John, like having already have a familiarity with these characters, having him have a sense of like self-discovery as far as where like his origins to some degree and what he could be a part of, and finding this conflict of I've had a whole way of life that I've known as far as I have an owner, I do what I can for him, and then being like, but what if I didn't? What if I engaged in this other life where I'm the star and I have a family that I never knew about? But like, there's just a lot of interesting things to get out of that. And the way he, brushes up against Jesse in that debate in himself, I think it's like the way Hanks has to play that. It's amazing that it's still a hilarious performance, but it gets you thinking about that on an emotional level. So it's just Tom Hanks is just great in this role.
Yeah, and I like, of course, the whole like. The journey of life and the stages of life and self-discovery, right, is a big theme that goes throughout Toy Story because of course it is, because it's Pixar. Like, it can't just be about fucking toys. But I like one of the ways that I like Toy Story 1 and 2 working together, right, when I sort of look at them as a unit, is the way that in Toy Story 1 it is kind of, it's all about coming to terms with like who you are as defined by sort of external forces. And so, Buzz thinks he is a real space ranger, and then Woody spends the whole time trying to like explain to him what he actually is within the context and rules of this like world they inhabit. And then in Toy Story 2, they both of them kind of find out more about their origin stories, but like in the opposite way. So like Woody finds out who he really was before Andy, but then like the fake Buzz, or the still delusional Buzz, like finds out that Zurg was his father and all that, and there's kind of these like two different tracks of kind of this self-discovery thing. And so like for Buzz himself, watching a delusional Buzz figure out his own life, like only gives him more understanding of who he is. And I kind of love the way that they both dive deeper into that theme in the second movie, but then also kind of swap places with Woody and Buzz, in sort of where they are kind of maturely and in terms of their sense of self and belonging and all that sort of thing. And yeah, that's why to me, like they the one thing that stops me from putting Toy Story 2 as like this is the best standalone Pixar movie is I do think it's made better with Toy Story 1, even if just a tiny bit.
I mean, that's like, it's weird to be like, if I have to find like the weird reasons why to put it down to some degree, it's that kind of stuff when I look at, which is why I place Finding Nemo. Like Finding Nemo is its own thing entirely. That's why I could say it's a perfect movie in its regard as far as what it's trying to do. It doesn't rely on anything. It doesn't rely on any IP. It doesn't rely on any familiarity with anything beyond the ocean. So it's like it's in its own place in that manner.
But I feel like that critique, John, is like, because a lot of people say, many people say, it's trendy to say now that The Godfather 2 is better than The Godfather, but it's like, you need the first Godfather, and The Godfather makes part 2 better. And so I don't think that's a knock against the sequel, that the sequel is made better than by the first movie, because like, that's kind of the point. Like, unless it's a standalone, like, episodic thing, which would barely be, like, maybe be a sequel in name alone. I think the fact that it builds on the first one makes it better is like a credit to it in a way.
Oh, sure. But it's still a sequel, and there's still something about, the standalone original, if this was the only movie, right, that I think we still, for good or bad, like whatever the reasons are, I think for some reason we still sort of give a little bit of an edge to, like, there's not going to be a WALL-E 2, right? So like WALL-E is WALL-E as WALL-E, and you're going to judge it by those merits, and that's just how it's going to be.
Yeah, I get that.
Same with Ratatouille, which is another one of my favorites, and one of the more underrated ones, I think. Well, there you go. There you go. Like, it is what it is, and there's not going to be anything to enhance it. So if there's a Ratatouille 2 and it was better than Ratatouille, again, like, it's like, yes, but it's not able to do anything without the first one. And so, yeah, I don't know how.
That's a whole different debate, especially when it comes down to debating like some of the greatest films ever made, like Godfather 2 or Empire Strikes Back
or Terminator 2, even.
Yes, yeah, obviously there's an origin point, although I do think each of those films is it's made in a way where it does, it doesn't hurt to see the first one, obviously, but they can exist on their own. It's not impossible to.
That's true.
Like, I grew up with Terminator 2. Terminator didn't come around for a little while before I actually saw it. But so it's,
I think that's true of a lot of people, actually.
I wouldn't deny it.
Probably, yeah.
So it's just a weird kind of debate as far as like how much you can appreciate something for not being the first one, but it's like, here we are, we're all saying Toy Story 2, if not 3, are the best of these movies. So
yeah, and there's not a bad performance anywhere in, and like every character in Toy Story 2 is also perfectly cast. Like, there's just not a dud among them, right? And Jim Varney was replaced by what's his name
in the third one. He's replaced, and this is his last.
Blake Clark.
Yeah,
Blake Clark. He's in a lot. Yep. He's a character actor. He's in a lot of like Adam Sandler movies and a number of other comedies and things.
He's great, and but he sounds just like Jim Varney, and I don't think you miss a ton there. Like, Jim Varney was cast because his voice is distinct, right? And like,
even then, Jim Varney's still like pitching it a little bit to be more, southern twang. So it's like, you get another guy that also pitches a voice as opposed to just doing themselves.
Yeah, but I loved Joan Cusack in this movie. I love Joan Cusack in general. The one thing I will say, like, about 3 and 4 is that I wish they made more use of Jesse. This is like certainly Jesse's high point, and I get that they were like, expanding the characters and all that sort of thing, and like, I don't think any character is overlooked or like badly used in any of the sequels. But if I had one complaint about the 2 sequels to this, I would say, like, more Jesse, center Jesse more.
You can argue 3 and 4 also put a lot of buzz on the wayside as well, because again, they're ultimately stories about Woody. Like, he is the central character in these movies.
True.
Like, it may say Tom Hanks, Tim Allen on the first 2 movies posters, but and the first one is a buddy comedy, but it's Woody's arc that we're generally following in all these movies. Like, he's the central character to all this. Yeah. Slinky's my favorite character, by the way. I think Slinky's great. He's the... Although the last few times I've watched some of these, Fucking Rex has kind of jumped up the list. I
Oh,
think like,
Rex and Ham. This, by the way, so John Ratzenberger, obviously, we all know is if you don't know, Pixar trivia is in every Pixar movie, right? In some capacity, but the Rex and Ham dynamic in this movie is fantastic, and like Ham's whole thing with the remote, where he's to go around the corner, right, when he's like flipping through all the channels, and Rex is like stop, and he's like, too late, gotta go around,
gotta run
right?
the horn again. Like, it's such
I just love that gag. I have no idea why. It's just one of those random.
I think it's because you like you. I think it's because it's a toy, but also you get it. It's like it is easier just to keep going rather than stop and go backwards. That just makes sense. And of course, Don Rickles is just killing it as Mr. Potato Head. I mean,
oh yeah. And it's that kind of like attention to detail as well that it was what separates Pixar from other really great anime. Like there for a time there were other studios trying to do computer animated movies and we're not anywhere close to Pixar. I think that's changed a little bit. I think the fields. I mean, there's certainly been some great CGI animation movies that are not Pixar that have come out in the last 10-15 years. But there's something about like that kind of a gag, right? That only Pixar does, and still I think Pixar is kind of in a class of its own when it comes to those really kind of like subtle bits of humor and character precision and like that sort of thing that I don't think anybody has quite touched. Like I love the How to Train Your Dragon movies. I think they're fantastic and it's a great story and like it's beginning to end it's fantastic. But like again, it's not Pixar, right? Like there's still when Pixar is Pixar, it still has that sort of like breath of humanity to it that I don't think anything else quite.
I mean, you could argue the same for Disney animation versus Pixar. You can,
sure.
It's for me and for many. I'm not unique in this manner, but like you can recognize the animation style. You can just recognize like there's something there that's you can tell separates these different studios from others. Some it's more obvious, like Illumination. You're not going to confuse for anybody else because they suck. But the rest of them, like it's. I know what a DreamWorks movie looks like. I know it separates, I don't know, Bolt from Ratatouille. Like it's not hard to like see these, these design changes or what have you. But and in terms of the just the writing and the tone of these things, Pixar. I mean, there's a reason they have a certain esteem that's attached to their name, and when they disappoint some people, that's why, because they're not living up to this kind of expected level of quality because they just knocked it out of the park so many times in a row. Where if DreamWorks fumbles the ball, it's like, all right, like it's not no one's worried about if DreamWorks is ever gonna get the magic back again because it's like they so not that they so rarely achieve it because honestly I think there's a lot more good DreamWorks films people want to recognize, but I mean
as we're recording this, that new Puss in Boots movie is apparently phenomenal, and like
I've seen it. It's quite good.
It's amazing. Like I feel like it's an indication of the Pixar Disney thing. Even the Pixar thing alone, like the Disney thing is separate because like Strange World just bombed, but it's just like, oh wait, there's a great all ages, like even for adults, animated movie in theaters that's not Pixar. Like it's noteworthy when like literally anyone else does what Pixar has made a habit of doing, right? It's just like they're the ones like you can trust them, they're going to be good. If anybody else does it, just like, oh my god, there's another one, there's a competition, there's a competitor.
I'd argue there was a certain period of time where that was certainly like the thing where it's like Pixar has this mapped from 95 to like basically when Cars comes out. It's just like can't miss. Like these guys just, oh my god, everything's coming. I'm not saying Cars is bad, but I'm just saying in terms of like, or I guess Wall-E. What's like? I guess Cars 2 is like the stamp on it as far as like when there's a something of a turn. Like there's that, and within that period, that's when any other animation studio is coming along, and it has to be a competitor automatically. Like you surround that, you still have Disney movies, and you have the Don Bluth stuff and things that are around. But like Pixar is there's that like good like 15-year period. There's just like anything else that's animated that arrives in the theater is automatically going to be matched against the dominant force in the industry.
But even like Cars 2 kind of had like a disclaimer. It's like, oh, well, it's a sequel, right? Like it wasn't like an original idea. And sequel. So I don't know.
But it began this thought that Pixar had lost the magic. Like that was the whole thing.
Right.
At that point for it, where it's just like, are they done? They're the cream of the crop. And I mean, they did 3 Toy Stories. Now they have Cars 2. Like what's next? And then they they to their credit, they follow that up with Brave. But then Monsters University is a prequel. Then you have Inside Out, which is a giant hit. But then you have Good Dinosaur in the same year, which is a flop. Then you have Finding Dory, which is gigantic. But people don't remember that Finding Dory made like $1.4 billion in the box office. Like it was super huge.
Yeah. Yeah, I think certainly like of the sequels to Toy Story 2. I've forgotten about Monsters. I like Monsters University fine. It's cute. And I love those characters. So, it's hard to go wrong with that. But like, yeah, the track record, I think, for sequels for Pixar has not been great. I didn't think much of The Incredibles 2 either. I've basically forgotten what it was about, to be honest. I like the first one a lot. Was it good?
Really
okay.
Good. I thought it was really, really good.
I guess what I say is like I don't distinguish it much from the first one. Like it just sort of blends in as one big movie to me. So I don't really, in the way that like the Toy Story movies are obviously like separated out in my mind. Those don't. And like, I remember seeing Finding Dory and thinking it was fine, but like it's not Finding Nemo. So I don't know. Maybe Maybe I want a new Bugs Life movie. Like if they want to do that, I'm all on board for more Bugs Life. Let's make that happen. But
they make the joke in this movie, right? Like that they're doing a Bugs Life too. It's like, well, no, not really.
I did some. I think it was when Disney was like announcing a bunch of stuff at the same time at like their D23 convention. It's like I think I tweeted something like Bugs Life obviously won't get a legacy sequel because all the bugs would have died by now. But,
yeah, they can't get the original cast back because they all died a few months later.
Honestly, the bugs probably died between the filming of that movie or the animation of that movie and the release of that movie, right? Because they all have very short lives, so definitely not 25 years later or whatever. But
but I mean, Incredibles 2 picks up 2 seconds after Incredibles ends, so it doesn't really matter that much.
Maybe that's why it blends in with me so much. It's like one big movie.
You end with the Underminer and you start with the Underminer.
Yeah, that's interesting. I want to ask a kind of uncomfortable question to both of you guys, which is the John Lasseter element of this. To me, and I do not blame Disney or Pixar for firing John Lasseter, and I think that was the appropriate thing to do. And sucks that he was like that. At the same time, it's hard for me to not see that since in the post Lasseter era that there has been a difficulty in finding a kind of unifying magical voice for Pixar. That just is my sense anyway. And again, like not to say that anything they've done in the meantime hasn't been great. Coco is amazing. It's a wonderful movie. Soul's a wonderful movie. Like again, I loved Luca. I love Turning Red, but I think Lasseter, brought a kind of sort of unified theory of Pixar that to me seems like has been missing since he's been gone. And again, this is not me saying hire him back and all should be forgiven. I do not think that, but I just kind of wonder what you guys think about the Lasseter influence here.
I'd argue he's not the only one that matters, and the ones that do.
There. I agree. He's not the only one.
I don't think you're not saying that, but like, Pete Docter and Andrew Stanton, and there's others to a lesser extent to some degree. But I mean, those guys they've been there. Lee Unkirk, another one, has been there. I mean, he's moved on, I believe, since he's like stopping doing stuff. But regardless, it takes a village, right? And John Lasseter certainly guided a ship in a way that helped. I mean, he's done as far as the work he's done in the world of animation, he's done a lot that is very good for it. The fact that he's not involved with Pixar anymore, you can look at that and look at the timeline of Pixar movies together and try to like find something out there as far as what's missing and is it him. At the same time, it's like, again, when a studio makes Toy Story up to Toy Story 3, that's Jesus, what is that one? 9-8 films. I mean, that's a long way for a studio to go without quote unquote missing.
Mm-hmm.
And so beyond just being one man being responsible for having a certain kinship to the success they've been having, it's also just impossible for a studio to keep that certain rate going for that frequently or that amount of time. I mean, it's it's hard for me to like fathom that because Lasseter is no longer around that's like synonymous with Pixar like losing some kind of edge here. I think it's just more the market gets flooded with a lot of this kind of stuff, and you want to keep producing these things. You want to take ambitious swings or make moves that may not go the way you want them to go, or what have you. And I also, just real quick, I saw, was it Luck, which Lasseter, had a heavy hand in from Apple, and it sucks. So, I mean,
that's true. That's true. That's fair enough. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not often that I say like an animated movie like sucks, because an animated movie, when you're making that, you have to be economical, right? You can't just animate a thing and like retool it later. You have to plan it all the way out in advance and then make the thing. So when an animated movie sucks, it's like, well, what happened here? Like, I don't have the answer to that one.
Yeah, no, that's a good argument. I guess you're sort of articulating what I'm kind of debating with myself, which is like, had Lasseter's sort of influence run its course anyway, versus like in my head, the movies that he kind of shepherded are the ones that I'm most in love with and most kind of emotionally attached to. So it's kind of, I'm sort of like, is my tendency to not be quite as emotionally invested in Pixar a result of that, or is it a result of the fact that it's like done so many miraculous movies that like now that it only does really wonderful movies that I find incredibly moving but will probably not watch twice? Is that just a product of like 20 plus years of or 20 almost 30 years of incredible work and output? And I think you sort of convinced me that that's probably,
I think that's more the case. You have to remember, like, the initial start of Pixar and their movies was like what they all like gathered around at like a lunch or something at a diner and like had a napkin full of ideas like toys, bugs, monsters,
yes,
fish. And of course that little robot that's like I remember they were advertising Wall-E. It's like, we always had this one other idea, is this robot. So it's like, I mean, the napkin is empty at this point, so it's like they're going in different directions. But I mean, what I'm saying is, these ideas haven't been like fostering in their minds for decades in the way that the initial ones had. That doesn't mean
that's
new
a good point.
The ones that'll be produced later on, ones that have come out since, aren't good or can't match up. But there is this kind of lingering feeling of Lasseter, Dr. Stanton, Bird. They all like had these really neat ideas that they've been toying with in their heads for decades, right? And then they finally got to make those things, and now they have to do something else. And they have the new people coming into Pixar. They're also doing something else. They can certainly match it. Again, I think Coco is one of my favorites. Soul is great. I mean, and people can make plenty of arguments for the other ones. Maybe not Lightyear, but I mean, the rest of them.
Yeah, we haven't talked about that, which is
is Lightyear Pixar? I guess it
is
has
Pixar.
Yeah, I haven't seen that either.
Of course.
Yeah,
I realized that as the question ended coming out of my mouth, I'm like, of course it's Pixar, but I haven't seen the last two Pixar movies.
I mean, those like Toy Story short films, or
they're all great.
But in terms of like being Pixar, like the Buzz Lightyear cartoon series was Disney. It wasn't Pixar. I mean,
like the Pixar studio on Letterboxd has 189 listings. So like that's a lot of short films. There's things before everything, right? So they've made a lot of things, and I think it's the same kind of thing. To go back to the conversation from a little bit ago, it's like why Quentin Tarantino, for instance, says he wants to end after 10, because he's like, he knows that if you keep making stuff, eventually you're gonna make a thing that's not very good. And so going from a thing releasing every 2 or 3 years to like one every year or one every 6 months, and like having different people, and it's hard to keep magic up.
I guarantee you, Tarantino will like make his 10th movie, stop for like a decade, come back with something, be like, yeah, I really want to do something again. Like,
well, he's also like, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to write another book, I'm going to write.
He's going to get all that. He's
series, right? Like,
he's going to get all that out of his system. He's going to see other movies and be like, God, I really like making movies, and he's going to come back and make something. It'll probably be great because he generally makes great films. So.
Everything he wanted was right there in front of him all along. Aaron, 2 points to what you said just before. One, if anybody makes like a docudrama or like a biopic about the origins of Pixar, the title should definitely be The Napkin is Empty. That's so you can take that one, anybody who's writing a treatment for that. And the other one you made me think of in all of the pitches for these ideas, like the great meme about the premise of Pixar movies of like, what if toys had feelings? What if bugs had feelings? What if monsters had feelings? What if feelings had feelings?
Oh, Inside Out's top 3 too, because
Yeah.
Center of the Moon for me is just like that might be the best Pixar moment of all time. Just like that one line, just like, oh boy, bing bong.
It's my lowest of the Doctor films, and it's not because I dislike it. I think it's great. I think it's fantastic. It's a really good movie. It's just it's one where I think too much about what's sticking out to me as a problem, and it's annoying because I don't want to feel that way. But
yeah, and I guess like what I will say, if I could like say one thing about the great Pixar movies that I don't necessarily feel the same way as you guys feel, is like they're exhausting. Like Coco's exhausting, and like Up is exhausting, and Inside Out is exhausting, and Soul's exhausting, and like WALL-E is exhausting.
Just like emotionally exhausting?
Yeah, like I'm drained by the end of it. Whereas with Toy Story 2, I cry during the Sarah McLachlan thing, but like, you know, it's 90 minutes. I'm in and I'm out, and I'm happy at the beginning and I'm happy at the end, and it's all lovely and cheerful and bright and colorful, and I know these characters and love them, and so I'm okay. Same with like Finding Nemo, right? It's like not emotionally exhausting the way that Coco is. Like Coco is too much, man. Like that's too much. I can watch that movie like once every 5 years, but oof, that's a lot to take in. But yeah, it's not so much the high concept; it's the emotionally taxing nature of them. I struggle with so much.
To talk about, because I think we should talk about Toy Story 2 a little bit more.
Yeah.
We've gotten away with it. Real quick before we get specifically on Toy Story 2, I do want to say Lightyear movie that it's fine. It is entertaining to me that the opening of Toy Story 2 is a better Lightyear movie than Lightyear is as a whole.
I agree.
I don't know why there was so much difficulty in wanting to make Lightyear into. It's like, if you want to do that, cool. Why make it so confusing? Like, it took months to just get the idea of what this movie's supposed to be.
It's so weird.
Then they finally deliver it, and it's like, wait, Andy's favorite movie was like this solemn drama about a man losing most of his life and making new friends and learning lessons. Like, that would be his favorite movie growing up.
I do credit the world that Andy lives in, that there was a movie that he liked as a child that featured a same-sex relationship in 1994.
I pointed that out for sure. Yeah.
So that's very progressive of the Pixar universe in which Andy inhabits. That movie is fine. I enjoyed every minute of watching that movie, and when it was over, I'm like, what was that about? Like, what did I just watch? I have no idea. Like, okay, sure, that was fine.
Meanwhile, I put on Toy Story 2 again for this podcast just to like get my mindset, and it's like the fucking opening of this movie is and like all Toy Story movies are like really doesn't that matter when you think about it. Like, think about all the elaborate opening sequences.
Yeah.
Out of these movies. That third one especially is like, Jesus, they've done it.
Is the third one the train heist?
Oh yeah.
Okay, that's what I was going to say too. I'm like, that's clearly the best one. Yeah, and I like that whole gag of the opening being this like fantasy play world. But the train heist one is brilliant.
I'll always remember too, though, watching it in the theater for the first time, because it's like, wait, what is this? Like, what are we watching here? Like, Buzz is he dreaming? Maybe, I guess. And then you get to that bit where like he jumps over Zurg, big Zurg blasts his upper torso off. And I always remember because I was in the theater with my mom.
They killed off Buzz in the first scene.
Holy shit! I was in the theater with my mom, and she was like, "Oh." And I was like, he's gone. And then it turns out it's a video game, and now I'm just looking at it being like, that's like an amazing video game for 1999. Like, the graphics on that
and it's a Super Nintendo, not an N64, right? So like it's
the 32 bits they're running on that one.
No, 16. It was 16-bit.
16 bits. Sorry, 16 bits.
Yeah,
I think
that's
32X or a Sega Saturn.
Well, it was already like we were at the N64 PlayStation era, but for some reason, like they started making the movie when Super Nintendo was still the thing. So that's the problem with making a movie that takes 2 years to actually produce.
Or maybe they're not just very wealthy. You know what I mean? Like maybe they're not able to afford an N64. It's a single parent family.
Yeah, it is, right?
It's also just a nondescript machine that happens to have purple buttons on it. I don't think it's necessarily
that's as a Super very Nintendo, clearly a Super Nintendo controller. I mean, it's like 100%.
It is, but I don't think they identify it as such.
No, not in world. Not
because it could just be like, well, maybe we just can't design a 64 right now with the controller and the rights or whatnot.
Bigger Toy Story universe question: do we know what happened to Andy's dad? Is that ever like something that's ever? I've watched all the movies over again recently, and it's never addressed. I don't know if there's any sort of like external canon answer to that question, but do you guys know?
He sold drugs to children and was shot.
Holy
outside an
shit!
airport.
Oh my god!
No, apparently this is real. This is a couple different websites on the internet say that in the backstory for the original movie, he had polio as a child.
What
Don't
the
know
fuck,
why that's in here.
Pixar? What is
And
wrong
so
with
then,
you?
when Andy's sister was born, he came down with post-polio syndrome,
my
which he ended
God.
up dying from.
Jesus
But
Christ.
so the Woody doll was apparently his that he gave to Andy.
That's what I figured, right? And I've always figured that Woody was the like absent dad and like the memory of the absent dad, which is what gives Woody so much sort of emotional heft for Andy, right? But like, does it have to be fucking polio? Like, what the fuck, man?
Polio is a weird one for a man that presumably would have died in his like 30s or 40s in the 90s. Like
I guess he could be an old dad. So Andy's like 10 in Toy Story, right? Maybe 8, maybe 7. So he's born in like 88, say. Say the dad was like 48. Say he was born in 1940. He could have the math is weird. The math doesn't really add up. I am very glad they
there's other diseases. That's all
this
we're
is
saying.
what I'm saying.
Polio is such a specific thing that's like that was eradicated for the most part.
This
Like
seems-
why would it be around in the 90s?
This seems like someone whose dad died of polio was like, it has to be polio. Like, it won't make this movie unless it's polio.
It's like Andrew Stanton's like, well, back in the 40s, my mom had polio, so I just wanted to incorporate that into the Toy Story universe. It's like, Andrew, we could do something different. Like polio, though, guys. I mean,
Well, Joss Whedon wrote the final draft of the first Toy Story, and we know
he's one of many writers.
Dad problems. So maybe that was his, I don't know, his issue. Another incredibly problematic figure involved in the creation of the original Toy Story.
Yes, but when you talk about Toy Story, you have to refer to him as Academy Award nominee Joss Whedon.
Oh, I'm sorry, Academy Award nominee Joss Whedon.
Just like how we call him Sir Don Rickles.
There are some problematic people who have appeared in the Pixar movies.
There have been problematic people who've appeared in every single project that's ever been made.
That's true, but like some outstanding, high-profile, deeply
yeah.
problematic people who've appeared in some Pixar movies, including one Kevin Spacey and the totally fine, no problems here, Kelsey Grammer.
Wait, what was Kevin Spacey in?
He was in Bug's Life.
Bug's Life.
Yeah.
As Pixar's
okay.
as Pixar's best villain character, so it has that going for it.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
That's not a joke. That's just legit. Hopper is a fantastically menacing villain. I can't take that away from him.
I completely agree with you. Okay. What, aside from Joey, we'll close with Toy Story 2 on this question. We'll talk about highlights that don't involve Sarah McLachlan and making you cry. What's the standout scene in Toy Story 2 for you, Joey?
I like the opening, like Aaron was saying before. I think it's a very inventive way to just get into the thing. I like when I don't know why I love the fake Buzz or the new Buzz, but like when new Buzz is in the elevator and like so committed to like the fact that he's got the anti-gravity and all like whatever, just like, and everyone around him just like, all right, I guess Buzz lost his mind again. Like there's just something so simple and fun and silly about that I just admire.
Yeah.
And I also just like the not really as a scene as much as the idea of like giving Woody a backstory. Like we know he's a cowboy. We don't really know much more than that from the first movie, but to have this like entire history just based on like artifacts that are around him in that office is just so easy world building that they just nail.
Yeah.
And like watching the old episodes of Woody's Roundup, I think is great. But I think other than Jesse's song, my favorite scene would be the elevator scene when they're trying to rescue Woody when new Buzz is with the gang of guys that we know.
It's a good choice.
Thank you.
Aaron, what about you?
See, this is the thing with Toy Story 2. There's so many fantastic
scenes.
Which is, again, why it puts it up at the top for me.
Yeah.
But if like, to narrow down to a few, the sequence where Buzz, Potato Head, Slinky, and Rex and Ham, they have to like cross the road to get to Al's Toy Barn. That's one of mine. It is a wonderful madcap action sequence as far as like the cones moving, the cars,
and the human
like, darting out of the way.
That scene is like they just don't care.
Well, it's clever. It's clever because it makes it dangerous without actually showing like terrible things happening. It just shows cars getting wrecked, so it knows how to play its cards on that matter. But it's just hysterical. Like the close like cement ball like cylinder that's rolling at Potato Head, and as he gets gum on his shoe. Like, it's just every little bit and piece of that is just a wonderfully conceived sequence.
Agreed.
Oh, you know what I like in relation to that? It's not that thing. I love that as well, but I like that it seems like Al is making the commercials, like filming them in real time. Because like the commercial that ends the movie, he's like sobbing.
Yeah.
It's like in reality, you would have filmed this months ago, but I like that he's just like, all right, I got to do a new one. I'm not in a good mind space, but I got to do it anyway.
I took notes while watching the movie this last time, and I wrote Al's sad commercial down as my notes. It's like, why would he film this? Like, but that's it. They do have those, like, used car salesmen do like live TV commercials. That's like always a big joke in a lot of things because they do like live spots, stuff like that, which is a weird concept to begin with. Like, why would you do this? Like, there's no control. Okay, so there's that sequence. There's the whole sequence where the old man from Jerry's Game comes in to touch up Woody, which is another thing we need to talk about. Like, the animation, I remember Dust was huge for the, like, that was a huge thing that they just like developed for this movie. The fact they could do Dust now, that was just a big step up for them. And then like Monsters Inc. would be like, and then we did fur. We did fur. We invented fur for animation. Like, they just had like these new developments as far as how far they can go with the technology. But like this. Watching Toy Story and just watching every Pixar movie, like you watch Toy Story, the first one, and it's like, there's a few toys on screen, not much is happening. You watch, A Bug's Life, and it's notable that like there's not a lot of bugs hanging around all the time. And then you just keep going from then. You see just the worlds expand because of how much better the technology's advanced, and it's not a giant detriment because like, well, the screenplay is a screenplay. It's just, it's just a good movie, but at the same time, it's like, look how great these films look. Like, look at what's going into these and just improving upon what you already had. That was great to begin with. But yeah, so that scene where the old man Jerry's Game comes in and like touches up Woody and does his eyes and his hat and his arm and everything. It's like, I just really like the kind of the minutia in all of that. It's really just it's very clever to watch and everything. But like everything involving Woody's Roundup is amazing to me. Like the old timey cartoons they had to animate and show,
and the marionettes,
the marionette, the song, like all of that stuff. I just found to be really, really clever as far as them writing, like you're saying, Joey, right? Writing this kind of backstory for Woody, but then having to like properly develop it. Like they would have toys, you would have this, you would have that. Like they thought it out as far as what would realistically make sense as far as what this show would have been to kids, which is this version of an old Western kids show kind of thing. And it's funny, but also just really clever, and it entirely like explains these other characters to varying degrees, especially like Prospector and why he'd be pissed off all the time. Like there's just so much there that I really enjoy it. Plus that gag where like the dog like barks one thing and Woody's like, what? He's like he says everything.
I'm glad you brought up the Woody's Roundup thing. I one of the things I keep like admiring is the way that Pixar like uses CGI and this like cutting edge animation to recreate an old style of like making children's programming with marionettes. And like I think about that in relation to like the new version of Thunderbirds that like is all CGI, and like the 60s version that was all marionettes. And so it's like an inversion of that where they're like using this technology to make something old, but like it looks really authentic and it's so loving and great. And just the whole way, like the whole sort of Americana of that, like it feels so all of the like the lunch boxes, authentic, but also like beyond authentic. I mean, it feels so like lived in. It feels so true to what exactly that would be without specifically referencing like any one particular property. Like there's a Lone Ranger and Roy Rogers and all that sort of thing, right? Sort of lumped into one thing. And it's so beautifully realized in terms of the detail. Even the way that like the lunchbox version of Woody looks different from the toy and marionette version of Woody. Whereas there's this like sort of quasi-realistic Woody that's like another version of the character that is included. It's so there's so much detail, and it's so sort of lovingly realized. But yeah, I agree. Like the crossing the road scene, I still laugh out loud every time I watch that. It's so clever, and it's just so like it's that great combination of both really clever comedy and really like absurd stakes, and the idea of these toys causing real world damage and being completely oblivious to it, but then also just like the cuteness of watching these like cones with feet cross the road, and like everything about that is just so goddamn exquisite. And I also think the same of like the stuff that happens inside the toy store with like Barbie driving everybody around, and like, you know, the Jurassic Park reference with Rex running up against the mirror and all of that stuff. I think the whole like airport scene is a little tiring. Like it's not, I don't think it sort of overstays its welcome a little bit, but that's okay, because I think all of the kind of high adventure action sequences that this movie does in the middle part, sort of like that's where all the fun is, and at the end it's just sort of it's kind of a denouement. Like I think the airport thing kind of goes on for a little bit too long, but even the airport thing with like the luggage trolley is like hysterically funny, right? And like the way that they drive it home, and
that is another like key sight gag for me, because I love that it's a transition shot as far as it's night. It's like, how'd they get there? Oh, they had a luggage trolley, and then it transitions to day, and it's just the subtlest gag of like the two neighbors walking outside, and like one has like a cup of coffee. Like, okay,
what the hell happened here? Yeah, it's really great. To your other point, and we'll end with this, and then we'll ask you our closing questions here. The leap in animation from Toy Story 1 to 2, I think is obviously the biggest gap, right? You can certainly see between like 4 and 2 also a pretty big gap in quality, but from 1 to 2 it's obviously enormous. Mm-hmm. Is that, do you think, because 2 cost 3 times as much as 1 did, that it had a $90 million budget as opposed to $30 million budget, or like
that? I mean, that's exactly why.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That's you. When you spend more money on a movie, you ideally get better results.
Yeah. I also think like the way that computers advance, like 4 years is so much time
for sure.
And I know that there's more times. Like there's a decade between this and 3, but like the first one is the only one. Like this still feels like it could have come out, maybe not today, but like recently, right? Like the first one's kind of rough. It's kind of, you know, they're still figuring out what they're doing. But like this is like this looks unbelievably good for 23 years ago.
It's so beautiful. It really is. Yeah. Like it's so beautiful to the point that like I can see that Toy Story 4 is like exquisitely beautiful, but like not so markedly that it makes Toy Story 2 look bad. Like Toy Story 2 just looks gorgeous, and
well, that's the insane thing, because we didn't talk about this, but Toy Story 2 was going to be a direct-to-video sequel.
Well, we talked about that in the opening. Yeah, I know. We talked a lot about that in the opening.
Okay. Everyone's favorite subject, everyone's favorite topic, intro talk.
Because it's wild that they went from, we'll just toss one of these off to, this is one of our premier movies, and it looks spectacular.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And like I kind of want to see the alternate reality of like the direct-to-video Toy Story, and like how that world works, and like how that universe plays out for Pixar and Disney. It's sort of fascinating to think about. But
I'll tell you this: you don't want to see that.
No, I want to see it out of like morbid curiosity. Like I'm glad it didn't happen that way, but like I really want to know what that looks like. You know what I mean?
It's just be Jim Hanks and someone that's in Patrick Warburton.
Oh, that's his name, Jim Hanks. There you go. Yeah, there you go, Joey.
Yeah, it'd be Jim Hanks and Patrick Warburton doing a little bits, and then you're like, oh, okay, they made something like that.
Patrick Warburton was a pretty good Buzz Lightyear. Let's be honest.
I'm not dissing the actors. It's just like
better than Chris Evans.
I understand what you're saying as far as the morbid curiosity. It's just like there's nothing to get out of it.
I know, no, there definitely isn't. But I just like I want to peek inside that world and be like, what the fuck were you doing?
Well, speaking of Patrick Warburton, this is the first time I've seen this movie since I watched Seinfeld. So seeing Al as Newman made a lot of sense. So having Putty in there could have been nice.
Wayne Knight is not exactly like there's not a lot of variety in the kind of Wayne Knight.
No, he's always Newman. He's always Newman.
Yes, and he has a voice like Kelsey Grammer, where you're like, oh, know who that is right away.
Unless you're watching like Punisher Warzone or Blind Spotting, where Wayne Knight's like, oh, he's here. It's pretty much just Newman the whole
time. Good times. All right, so that's. I think we'll leave it there. We're gonna close with our final 2 questions.
Aaron, do you have a favorite film from 1999? I'm sure you do.
I had a feeling that was gonna be a question, and I was just thinking, man. I mean, obviously, we talk about 1999 as like this amazing year for films, and there's so many. That I now it's my mission right now to go on Letterboxd and be like, I'm gonna make the definitive list I have for myself for like my top probably 30 of 99.
It's tough. It's very tough.
Yeah, it is.
Fight Club is my answer that I have currently. Fight Club, maybe Three Kings.
Oh, interesting. Okay, that's we haven't heard that one yet.
Those are two of my favorite movies ever, but there's also a lot of options in 1999. So
Yeah.
it's but like the Limey's right there. Ghost Dog is right there. It might be Ghost Dog.
I will say, while you figure that out, because I think these are all great answers, as a throwback to the opening segment, today's Sight and Sound poll, the only 99 film is one I don't think that we're counting as 99, maybe, is Beau Travail. Are we counting that as this year or no?
I don't know. We'll see.
I tend to see Beau Travail as a 1999.
That's
like,
fair.
But one of my favorite film critics, David Ehrlich, gave, I don't know why I said one of, my favorite film critic, David Ehrlich, posted his ballot, and he had Eyes Wide Shut as number 2. So we've covered that already. So that's a very strong recommendation from a guy who knows film. So that did not make the top 100, though.
We only brought up Three Kings in relation to Malkovich because of Spike Jonze, but nobody's said that yet. So I think that's an interesting. Maybe we'll have Aaron back for that one.
I mean, I'm certainly happy to talk about Three Kings. That said, my answer, it's going to be Ghost Dog. It's Ghost Dog.
All right.
Cool.
So it's changed quite a bit in the last minute or so. But
I'm just thinking about like these, like there's definitive films for me that are
Yeah.
on like my all-time list, and for a good while, like Fight Club was my favorite movie. It still is one of my favorite movies. I mean, and for the the good reasons, not the bros like Fight Club reasons, which are annoying because it ruins the people that like Fight Club for the right reasons. But
we talked a lot about that in our Fight Club episode, about that very thing. So yeah,
I liked Ghost Dog because I was like, this is the movie the Wu-Tang Clan would make if they made a movie. And then RZA actually made The Man with the Iron Fist. I'm like, oh no, this is the movie the Wu-Tang Clan would make if they made a movie. Okay, I get it.
Hey, Russell Crowe is having a ball in that movie. I mean,
so true.
And they're still friends because RZA shows up in Russell Crowe's movie they just directed, Poker Face. It's like, oh, they just hang out. I like to think about RZA and Russell Crowe hanging
Ghost out. Face Killer. Anyway, I'm getting too.
All right, Aaron. Maybe a tougher question, maybe an easier question, because you had at one point your answer. What is your favorite film of all time?
Okay. There's two default answers that I give these days.
That's fine.
One is Jackie Brown.
Cool.
And the other is Jaws.
Okay.
Jackie Brown is what I tend to like look to as far as my number one ever.
So that's like an edgy answer, even for like, what's your favorite Tarantino movie? Like that's not the one anybody ever says.
It's certainly risen over time, but yes, it's the less traditional pick. Jackie Brown's, it's amazing.
Now is that? Do you have like an Elmore Leonard thing as well? Like so what is it?
Out of Sight is one of my other favorite movies of all time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like I mean, and 310 to Yuma, and there's plenty of Elmore Leonard stuff that I really like.
Have you seen Justified? Did you watch Justified?
Love Justified.
Yeah.
Justified is one of my favorite shows that came on.
Okay, so you are an Elmore Leonard guy for sure. So that's part of it. But like, what about Jackie Brown like sets apart in the Tarantino oeuvre for you?
It's the kind of thing where Tarantino is among my favorite like directors working.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just the whatever he's doing, it connects with me in the right way. Where I just like it's not a matter of being biased. It's just more of I don't see the bad here. I only see what makes all of this amazing. So when I look at Jackie Brown, it's the kind of thing where it's doing a very human story. Like there's no real tricks to this movie compared to something like Pulp Fiction or things that are just like flashier. It's telling a compelling story about people in a way where the plot doesn't kick in till an hour into the movie, and by doing that, I just get settled so much into who these people are and how they speak to each other because Tarantino and Elmore Leonard, who he's being adapted, it's just the dialogue just so there, and you have these terrific performers made up of a middle-aged to older cast at this point with Pam Grier and Robert Forster and Sam Jackson and Michael Keaton. Like you have all these terrific actors giving just the best dialogue to converse with each other that's funny and filled with emotion and what have you. It all works for me in a way that I just can't like match that to anything else as far as the satisfying feeling I get from something that like hits me in all the right ways as far as the kinds of movies I like, which are like dark comedies, crime movies that I may lean on. I certainly have, there's no genre that I dislike, but it's more of like if I'm angling towards something, a dark comedy is kind of where I'm at, and this just does it for me. Like it just works like every time around. It's 2.5 hours. I can put it on over and over again and be fine. Like it there's masterful one-liners. There's amazing moments throughout. There's these great actors, as I mentioned, doing these amazing performances. I could connect my parents to some of these characters quite a way. As far as just kind of like the tone that they give, the kind of like
Yeah.
they've lived a life kind of
Yeah.
thing that kind of hits me in some places as well.
Interesting.
And I mean, it's just the finest hours of most of the people in this cast. It's probably my favorite Sam Jackson role. It is my favorite Pam Grier role. It is my favorite Robert Forster, who's an
Max
amazing
Cherry
actor.
Bell Bondsman.
Yeah,
Robert Forster's awesome. When he showed up in Breaking Bad, I was like, "Fuck yeah!"
When I saw Alligator for the first time this year, have either of you seen? Aaron, I'm sure you have. Have you guys seen Alligator?
I bought the 4K and I was like, "Oh, you rocks!"
So, John, have you seen Alligator?
I haven't seen it. No.
So he's a cop investigating a loose alligator in the city of Chicago.
Yeah.
And there's a running gag through the movie that he's balding, and he's very sensitive about the fact that he's balding, and people just keep dunking on him. Like, it has nothing to do with the plot, and it's so perfect. It's just the funniest, meanest, like, just but perfectly. Man, he's so good. Rest in peace.
And now, so now, like you, I'm sure you realize now. Why don't I watch Jackie Brown? It's like this is where that joke came from. It's an alligator reference of anything. Like so it's it's a movie that does all the things that I like in a Tarantino movie already, and then just what those movies excel most other movies to begin with for me. So it's like, yeah, this is the tops. This is
Joe and I are on a quest on Too Fast to do all of Tarantino's movies in theme, and I think we've done at least 4. We did 2 Kill Bill, we did Death Proof, and we did Reservoir Dogs. So whenever we get to Jackie Brown, I got to figure out how to do that. We will make sure to have you on to talk about that movie if you want to talk about that movie.
Happy to. I'm sitting here waiting because Pulp Fiction's about to drop on 4K, and I'm like, Jackie Brown, where's that happening? So I'm waiting for that.
Know.
I'm like, it's the kind of thing where like I'm avoiding watching it right now so I can wait for the 4K to come out so I can watch it again.
Well, Aaron, you've definitely put yourself in the candidacy for a couple of 99 movies that will be upcoming in months and years ahead as we continue down this road that we are now 9 months into, Joey. Is that I feel like
18 times 2, weeks. 36 weeks. That's about 9 months. We've almost gestated a baby.
Hooray! Our podcast is born just in time for Christmas. I don't know. Is that a thing? I don't know. Whatever.
What child is this?
What child is this who is laid to rest in your Spotify feed or something? Aaron, it's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for joining us. You've told us what you do. Where can people find the things that you do?
Everything I do ends up on my personal blog. The code is Zeke.com. Everything I write ends up over there, but I do write for WeLiveEntertainment.com and WiseTheBlue.com. I host the podcast Out Now with Aaron and Abe, which is on iTunes and anywhere you can find podcasts. And I'm on Twitter at Aaron's PS4.
And also, of note, he has Aaron's PS5, PS6, PS7 reserved, just in case.
Oh. Huh?
Yeah, I just got him claimed.
PS 3D 5000, whatever that's going to be when we get to the PSs. I think, is humanity going to survive to PS8? We should place bets on how far into the PSs we're going to get before we go extinct. That'd be a fun game. Joey, we're going to be back soon. We got a couple kind of surprises coming up in the next couple weeks, and then we're going to be back with a new round and a new theme, and it's all very exciting. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Aaron. Watch out for frogs.
And there's no pun that you're going to give because it's really not a movie that
I know that you used to laugh and call me names.
Oh, there you go. Okay, great. We'll see you next time.
Bye.